Hey everyone, Andrea Walford here. Today I want to share with you a video tutorial for a mixed media prayer card I created for my Prayer Box project. The Prayer Box project is something that I just started recently. It's a personal project that has been on my heart for a while now, and the whole purpose is to help me develop a deeper and more consistent prayer life. Now this project is part of a greater vision that I felt called to, one that I'm calling my Artsy faith. Over the last few years, as I've explored life and faith through my art and writing, I've come to believe that art can help us to connect to our faith in a deeper and more meaningful way. It's my hope that as I start to share my faith-based art and my process, it inspires you to use your creative gifts to get closer to God and deepen your own faith. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this project that I'm sharing today is a prayer card, and it's the first prayer card I created for my Prayer Box project. The reason I chose to create this card first is because in every prayer that I send heavenwards, I want to remind myself that it's not about me and what I want, but about God and what He wants. Ultimately, I know that what He wants for us is the very best life that we can possibly have. And sometimes, a lot of times, the things that we want, that I want, may not necessarily be what's ultimately best for me. So that's the story behind the art that I'm sharing with you today. Now let's dive into the process. So for my prayer card, I took the 12 by 12 inch piece of cardboard backing that comes in the packages of designer series paper from Stampin' Up. Now I've been saving these cardboard pieces for years, knowing that at some point I would use them for something. Well, that day is finally here. And the good thing is I have a huge stack of them. Now, of course, you can make prayer cards out of pretty much any kind of heavyweight paper or cardstock. For example, you could use pre-made index cards from the office supply store. You could cut up cardstock. About 100-pound weight would be a nice weight. You could even recycle cereal or cracker boxes. Now for this particular prayer card, I cut my piece to 4.5 inches by 6.5 inches. But I'm thinking that going forward, in order to maximize my cardboard backing pieces, which are 12 inches by 12 inches, I'm going to cut my prayer cards to 4 inches by 6 inches. And that way I'll be able to get 6 cards out of each piece. So the first thing I did was to stamp the Unity Christy Tomlinson She Art print stamp randomly onto the front of my prayer card in Ranger's Jet Black Archival ink, which is a permanent waterproof ink. After stamping it, I made sure that I dried the ink well with my Ranger heated craft tool. Then, on a piece of palette paper, which I had off to the side, I put a few drops of my golden quinacridone magenta fluid acrylic and my golden Indian yellow hue fluid acrylic. I then added a drop of my golden acrylic satin glaze to each. Now, the purpose of the glaze was to extend the drying time of my paint because I wanted my paints to stay wet long enough to blend a bit as I was applying the colors to my prayer card. To apply my paint, I used a dry 1-inch flat brush, and I brushed the paint on randomly. As I applied it, I tried to blend some of the areas together while also keeping some of the colors true and unblended. Now, after drying my paint, I flipped my card over to work on the back side. Now, the cardboard piece that I used is shiny on one side and matte on the other. So the first side I worked on was the matte side, which is why I stamped and then applied my paint directly to the cardboard. With this side though, because it has a glossy finish, I first decided to coat it with some gesso. What the gesso does is help give it some tooth so that the paints will better stick to the surface. Now the gesso that I used is the golden gesso, but really you can use any gesso that you have. So for this side of my prayer card, I opted not to add any stamping. I simply used my same 2 paint colors that I used on the front side, the quinacridone magenta and the Indian yellow hue, and I applied it in the exact same manner. Now, one of the things you may have noticed as I've been adding paint to both sides of my prayer card is that I am overlapping the colors. And that's not just because I'm trying to blend them, but also because I want to add layers, which gives the illusion of depth and texture. Now, although I was loving the bright colors, I did decide to bring in some gesso just to kind of mute certain areas so I could create a little bit more contrast and also to create varying, I guess you could say, shades of the different colors, because as the white blends with the colors, you get different tones of each of those colors. Then afterwards, once that side was dry, I went back to my original side. Now I decided with this side that while I liked the effect of the colors, I was seeing that stamping a little bit too much. So I just wanted it to have almost like the hint of stamping. I didn't want it to be quite so there where you could see it. So I took my gesso, and as you can see there, I brushed it Quite a decent amount, not enough that it completely covered the text, but certainly enough that it really pulled it back. And then I dried it a little bit and came back with a little bit more of my gesso with my finger and just pulled it in select areas and then dried it once more before moving on to my colors. So then once my gesso was dry, I came back with the exact same colors that I had done in my first layer. And I did it the same way. I took my two paints, I added a little bit of my acrylic satin glaze to each, and then I just started brushing it over my prayer card. And I tried to, once again, alter the direction of my brush strokes. And you can also see that I'm occasionally dipping into the white and integrating that into my pattern. Now, I just want to take a quick minute to talk about the acrylic paints that I'm using. Golden fluid acrylics are an artist quality paint, and you definitely pay for it. They're a lot more expensive than craft paints, which are pretty cheap, but they're also quite a bit more expensive than the paints offered by paper crafting companies like Ranger and Prima. Now, I originally bought these paints for my mixed media artwork. I create originals as well as prints that I sell, so I wanted a good quality paint. Now, I particularly love golden fluid acrylics because they're quite translucent and they dry with a glossy finish. If you're just getting started with faith-based art and you're only creating projects for yourself, then regular craft paints or paints like the Dina Wakley or Delusions or Prima lines are perfectly okay. So at this point now, I was happy with my paint coverage and decided that I wanted to add a little bit more visual texture. So I pulled out my little stencil. I think this one is called Small Circles or Mini Dots or something like that. It's a Crafter's Workshop stencil, the 6x6 size. I also used my ink blending tool from Ranger. And now the ink I'm using is another Ranger archival ink, and this one is called Vibrant Fuchsia. And I'm just applying it through my stencil with my Ranger blending tool. Now for this technique, you do want to make sure you're using a permanent ink like the Ranger archival inks or Sukaneko's line of StazOn inks, so that it does dry and set permanently on your acrylic paint. Now I love splats, so here what I did was I took some of my golden white gesso, placed it onto my palette paper, mixed in a little bit of water, and then used the tip of a small round paintbrush to add some paint splats. And I decided to only do that to one side of my prayer card. So now I'm ready to add my main image. And as you can see there, the paper that I used is one that I was actually experimenting with. I found it at the office supply store. It's a carbon transfer paper. Now I use this instead of transfer paper, which you buy at art supply stores. And I actually found that I liked it better. First of all, it's cheaper. I got 12 sheets for less than $4. And second of all, I found that when I was using it, it didn't end up smudging on my piece below, which was great because I do have that problem with transfer paper. Now this design that I'm using is one of my own. I created the graphic and then I combined some fonts and I sized it so that it would exactly fit on the front of my prayer card. So then all I had to do was position it directly over my prayer card, place the carbon paper in between the prayer card and my template, I guess you could call it. And then I just used a pencil and I pressed relatively firmly and I used that to get the impression. So the carbon transfers from that paper onto your card. Then I took a paint pen, and this is an extra fine Molotow black, I think it's called Signal Black paint, and it's just a nice fine tip paint pen, and I simply used that to trace over the lines that had come from my tracing using my carbon paper. So after I finished coloring in all the areas that I needed to using my black paint marker, I then came in with my white paint marker, and it's the same extra fine, same brand, Molotow, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, and I just traced around the word Lord. So now at this point, I decided to switch paint markers from the Molotow that I was using to my white Sharpie poster paint marker in, I think it's the extra fine tip. It's basically the finest tip that you can get with the Sharpie poster paint pens. And the reason I switched was I was just finding that the line of my other paint marker wasn't quite as fine as I wanted it to be. And I was also finding that it wasn't quite as intense a white color. So as you can see, I decided to come back with my Sharpie marker this time and then go over the words that I had gone over the first time. So now here I have the Paper Pieces collection called Pop Culture from Illustrated Faith, and I just grabbed that little tab there and I grabbed my Citrus Twist stamp set and stamped the words "He is sufficient" onto the top of that tab. And then I grabbed some soft gel medium, and again, this is the Golden brand, but you can use any kind of gel medium. Applied a little bit to the back and then stuck it to the top right of my prayer card and overlapped it with a little bit of this striped washi tape. And I'm not even sure what brand of washi tape this is. I just absolutely adore washi tape, and I've been collecting it forever. So now at this point, I just decided that I had to integrate a little bit of teal. And the color I'm using is my all-time favorite teal color. It's by Golden and it's called Just Teal. And I wanted to put a few splats on my card. Now I have a bit of a love affair with teal. If you've looked at my artwork, you probably noticed that wherever I can, I incorporate teal. And well, this was no exception. I just decided that I needed some teal because, well, teal makes me happy. So I mixed a little bit of water with that drop of teal, and then I took my little small round brush again and splatted it onto my prayer card. And I ended up getting it splatted on my silhouette, but I didn't like how it looked in the silhouette. I wanted the silhouette to be dark and black, so I wiped it off with a baby wipe, but you may have noticed it pulled back a little bit of black paint, which I'm going to be fixing in a minute. But in the meantime, I just grabbed the leftover teal paint, because of course I don't like to waste paint, especially teal, and using my finger, I just dragged it along the edges of my prayer card. Then I grabbed another paint marker, and off the top of my head, I can't remember what the brand of this one is, but it has a much thicker tip. So I used that to color over all those areas where I had accidentally wiped off my black paint when I was trying to clean off the teal splatters from that area. And then I just grabbed a little bit more teal paint and scraped some along the top of my tab. So now at this point, I was kind of trying to decide what I wanted to do with my card. I was really happy with where it was, but at the same time, I wasn't feeling like it was finished. So I found these little enamel hearts that came in a freckled fawn kit that I had bought, and I placed a teal enamel heart just along the top there in between the washi tape and the tab. And I also grabbed a roller date stamp and stamped that in my jet black archival along the bottom right. Now I did place another enamel heart, a red one there, but you'll see later I end up pulling that off. And then I grabbed my thicker paint marker and just started drawing some crosses, I guess like a cross pattern randomly in several areas of my prayer card. And then I just kind of took a step back and started looking at it and seeing, if I was feeling like it was finished or not. And well, it wasn't. So I grabbed another one of my Citrus Twist stamp sets that had this really neat little Saved by Grace image. And I stamped it onto some Stampin' Up! Whisper White cardstock using, I think it was the same jet black archival, cut it out, leaving a little white border around because I wanted to keep that effect of the white to help it pop against my silhouette. And I stuck it onto my card using some of my gel medium. Now there you can see I decided against that red heart, and I decided I wanted to continue on with that teal. So I grabbed my last little teal heart, so sad because I love those hearts, and I placed it to the left of my Saved by Grace sentiment. And then at this point I just finished off. I decided I needed a few more little crosses, which I just hand drew in. And with that, I decided that I was finally happy with how this side of my prayer card looked. Now, as to the other side, I still haven't decided what I'm going to do there. I have a few ideas, but I'm leaving that for now. It's already painted and ready to go, so really I just need to write my related prayer onto that side, and I'll probably add a few embellishments. So that brings us to the end of this video tutorial. Well, if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more of my Artsy Faith projects, then please be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and of course give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. Now, of course, in addition to my Artsy Faith videos, I also share video tutorials for the cards I make here on my YouTube channel about once a week. Also, if you'd like some free printables, patterns, and cut files, like the one I created for this prayer card, then please be sure to visit my blog post for this project and sign up for my Artsy Faith e-newsletter. You can get there by clicking on either the info link in the top right of the video screen or on the link posted below in the description section. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial, and I look forward to creating with you again soon. See ya!